All right. Hello, everyone. So, hopefully, everyone has had their coffee, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And thank you so much for taking the time to also join today's session. So, today we have, as you know, Dr. S.J. Miller, a Trans Plus Disciplinary Award winning teacher, writer, activist, and scholar, and is a professor in the Teacher Academy at Santa Fe Community College and adjunct associate faculty in the Education Doctorate Program in Educational Leadership and Learning in Organizations at Vanderbilt University. So, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And we had a little bit of a technical issue, so I appreciate your patience, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for the introduction, Karen. Thank you for being so wonderful and helping me get to this day. I really appreciate everything that you're doing for global awareness around gender identity justice and the efforts of the Global Foundation as well as UNESCO. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So, without any further ado, I want to go ahead and start. And first of all, I want to say that for LGBTQIA youth, we often look at data on maps and we look at it through eyes of worry and concern, as we should. And yet, there are moments of progress. In spite of the darkness, there is light. And that's something we need to focus on. We often focus on the trauma of queer youth rather than those stories of thriving and success. And that's one of the concerns we also have in research, because we want to make sure that our youth have positive sense of self, of recognition, of affirmation. So I'm going to talk about these nuances today through three different sections. Okay. I'm going to start off with two slides, and then I want to tell you a couple of stories. Okay. Can we see the screen okay? Kara? Can you? Is the screen up? Can someone verify?
Sorry about that. Yes, the screen is up.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So I just took a look at this for a minute, and I'll explain it as we go. So first of all, we have in the United States a very volatile political climate at the top, and that's affecting our state climate, our city climates, our local ordinances, our healthcare climate, our K-12 education, our taxation and revenue, our school boards, the private sector, the public services and goods. Again, we have splintering partisan work. And then at the very bottom, we have the child. And all of these different climates are impacting the children and those who are yet to come. And yet, currently, there are about 1.6 million people, 13 and up, who are about 0.6% trans or non-binary. And we're fighting over them, right? Their identities have become political dynamite. Political dynamite. And to give you a little bit more perspective, in the USA, in 2016, there were 27 recorded deaths, 27, okay? And then in 2017, we have about 27 to 29 reported deaths, and these are of trans folk. In 2018, we had 26 recorded deaths. In 2019, we had 26 recorded deaths. And then we had last year, or 2020, excuse me, 44 recorded deaths. Over 2/3 of these statistics are trans women of color. In the United States, we had about 40 murdered in 2021, and worldwide, nearly 375. As of today, this morning, 17 have been murdered. I did a similar presentation on Monday, and the count has gone up 2 people this week. So the likelihood of a trans person being murdered is as followed. There is a 1 in 18,000 chance for the average person to be murdered. There is a 1 in 12 chance for a trans person to be murdered, and a 1 in 8 chance for a trans woman of color. Research also shows that 1 in every 4 trans people are assaulted, and more than 1 in 4 for trans women of color. Worldwide, statistics show that 1 transgender person dies every 29 hours. And we're talking about murder, decapitation, being burned, being stabbed, and being raped. So why does gender identity justice matter for everyone? The question I want to pose to you is, why doesn't gender identity justice matter more? So I want to start off with an origin story, and this is for what I call Generation X. Okay, W.E. Du Bois in 1903 said, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at one's eyes, self of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity." At 1 year of age, Blue is a curious and precocious pre-toddler, feeling her way through the world, putting everything in sight in her mouth and grabbing spoons and using the family dog as a drum. Blue runs around a lot. In fact, Blue runs around so much, her family predicts that Blue will become a phenomenal runner or some type of athlete. It is the early 1970s. So Blue's parents dress her in gaudy suede jumpers with bling, pink socks, and clogs. Sort of a mismatch in gaudy suede jumpers that becomes the identity for Blue. At 2, Blue's affinity for running has accelerated. Now Blue runs around the dog, the neighbor, the birds, and right outside of the door into the yard and even into the street. Blue's mom supports these adventurous pursuits, but Blue's dad does not. He does not think it's appropriate for his daughter to behave as even as I don't want my daughter to be a tomboy, but Blue is just being Blue. From ages 3 to 5, Blue looks like a boy. Her hair frowed, her now tube socks hyped up to her knees, her cutoffs pretty hideous even for the 1970s, and her appearance masculine. Blue likes to watch her father urinate standing up, and when alone, tries to emulate the behavior, but with limited success and lots of splatter on the floor. Blue likes to watch her father shaving, and when alone, smears toothpaste on her face and traces it off with strokes of her toothbrush. She is far more successful with this task than the attempts at urinating. Blue likes to ride her huffy BMX bike around the neighborhood and bring food home to her mom and sister when her dad is late home from work. Blue feels that stepping into this category role is just right, because it is what feels right. Blue loves playing football topless in the streets like the other boys do, and seems to be living in a life that just seems right and normal. Then one day, Blue runs into the house screaming, "I want to be a boy." Blue's parents do not understand these words, but actually maybe they do. In response, Blue's dad begins to gender Blue by reminding her of her gender in passive-aggressive ways. For special events, he wrestles Blue into dresses and heels, only for Blue to throw her body into dog shit and roll around in it. Then Blue's dad beats Blue and dresses her up again. Helpless and in tears, Blue's mom watched passively as her only recourse. To different degrees, this family battle would play out for the next 40 years. At the age of 5, Blue at school. Blue has mostly boys as friends and acts behavior typical of other boys. Blue plays sports during recess, sits with the boys at lunch, tries to pee in the boys' restroom, and only wants to be in a classroom group with other boys. The only gender marker to reveal that Blue is a girl is her clothing and the colors, those that typically demarcate girls' identities. Blue doesn't understand when the class is separated into groups based on gender and why she is put into the groups with the other girls. After all, Blue feels like a boy, thinks she is a boy, and is treated like a boy by other boys in the school. As Blue goes through her primary and secondary schooling years, gender was not on the radar in her teachers' classrooms. Music, dating, film, and athletes and athletics are the only aspects of her life outside of her family that gives Blue sources to understand her gender confusion. Blue is drawn to musicians for unconscious reasons. For Blue, the artists and bands that she is most drawn to, like Morrissey, The Smiths, Adam Ant, David Byrne, Tracy Chapman, Boy George, Depeche Mode, The Talking Heads, Kate Bush, The Pet Shop Boys, Erasure, Trio, Oingo Boingo, New Order, Yaz, and David Bowie seem to express challenges to the gender binary through both looks and lyrics. Blue's favorite musician is Robert Smith, lead singer of The Cure. Smith dresses in black, has disheveled hair, wears lipstick, and occasionally even dresses. Smith's lyrics are poetic, dark, and forlorn, but they bring meaning, order, and respite to Blue. Blue listens to everything produced by The Cure until it drowns out the negative thoughts about Blue's internal gender struggle. The Cure is The Cure. Throughout high school, Blue dates males. Blue doesn't understand her feelings, but is drawn to boys, as if she herself is one. She has many close female friends and is attracted to some of them, but not from the identity of female. She is drawn to them as if she is male. So she continues to live her life, dates males, acquires friends along a continuum of genders, and with queered identities, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and straight. All of this just feels normal. The unconscious urges to be with males as a male remain unremitting, but she does not know how to talk about them. None of her teachers address gender or sexual identity in her classes. She reads no text, sees no examples of herself or others could possibly help her understand who she is. Even with her friends and teachers she adored, she is lost at school. Blue turns to film for similar reasons. Films assuage a curiosity that gives a visual recognition to different identities in the world. Without the language to support the unconscious emotionality that Blue feels, films such as The Unbearable Lightness of Being, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, I've Heard the Mermaid Singing, and all films by Ivory Merchant become running stills that shape and inform who Blue is becoming. Many of the characters in the films and the actors who illuminate them give calm to the raging storm brewing inside Blue. Soccer and swimming, two stabilizing factors for Blue's identity development throughout secondary school, provide critical spaces and opportunities to release pain and confusion. Again, without the language to know what Blue feels inside, those sports calm the inner rage. Blue is a better than average swimmer and often places in the top 5 at meets in both freestyle and butterfly sprints. Blue's natural talent as a runner is channeled into soccer, and Blue as a star. As a forward, Blue breaks district and state records, leads her team to compete at the state level, and becomes the first All-American in her state. 6 top academic and Division I schools offer her scholarships. She chooses Cal Berkeley. With memories of her family, music, friends, teachers, school, and film, Blue leaves for college. It is 1988. The future is unknown, and it would take Blue until age 40, 20 years later, to come to terms with her gender confusion. Recognition. The struggle for recognition is at the core of human identity. With social positioning as the presumed or normative condition, those whose gender identities fall outside of the binary tend to be misrecognized and misunderstood and suffer from what I call a recognition gap, much as I did in my childhood and adolescence when I was Blue. Misrecognition supports the possibility to be made credible, legible, or to be read and or truly understood. When one is misrecognized, it is altogether difficult to hold a positive self-image, knowing that others may hold a different or negative image. When the presumed normative condition is challenged, though, a corollary emerges. This suggests that at the base of the human condition, people are in search of positive recognition, to be seen as quote unquote normal because it validates their humanity. So looking back into my youth, there was no common language for society to help understand gender confusion. Or if there were, it was not brought into my life. This leaves me little room to wonder why a core group of my peers in high school and even in college, many who felt similar to me, have only come out to identify as trans or gender creative later in their lives. As language and understanding around gender creativity identities have become part of the social fabric of society, youth have had more access to recent changes in healthcare and therapeutic services that have supported them as they have grown into adults. These opportunities for visibility have galvanized a movement for validation and generating opportunities for both personal and social recognition. Now we see more trans and gender creative people portrayed positively in the media, while individuals such as Laverne Cox, Janet Mock, Chaz Bono, Aidan Dowling, Scott Schofield, Ian Harvey, and Caitlyn Jenner, and with TV shows such as Transparent, Becoming Us, Orange is the New Black, The Fosters, I Am Jazz, just to name a few, we see a growing media presence. With an estimated 700,000 people now living in the United States as trans, and even having an Out Trans 100, which is an annual award given to individuals who demonstrate courage through their efforts to promote visibility, we have a continuous growing population. But where teacher education still falls short is in how to support pre-K through 12 teachers about how to integrate and normalize instruction that affirms and recognizing trans and gender creative youth. These identities are nearly invisible in curriculum and in the standards. That is why this work is so important. It is an attempt to bring trans and gender creative recognition and legibility into schools. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and I want to move on now to one other small section. Oh, excuse me real quick as I scroll through my notes. Okay. The United States public school system has shaped almost every aspect of schooling practices, from personal policies to curriculum content to student code of conducts to extracurricular activities and beyond. For educators, policymakers, and researchers, and for those students with variability in their trans and non-binary identities with various legal protections, these students may in fact be criminalized, pathologized, and so forth. And what we see is a myriad cascade of issues, such as mental and health disparities, as presence in the foster care system, as pathways to prison, with lower GPAs, with bullying, with truancy, dropping out, and unfortunately, suicidal ideation. Yet these students are also increasingly visible within public schools and can be extraordinarily creative in negotiating the politics which seek to suppress, repress, and occasionally eradicate and erase their very being. So why does gender identity justice matter? Okay. So consider what it might be like to have a complex relationship with yourself. Consider knowing that there aren't many people or role models who understand your identity. How can you help yourself or a few or no one to support? This is an all too common reality for people with gender identities that are positioned as questionable when pitted against that which is perceived as socially acceptable, as human. Daily, people with gender identities that appear unrecognizable or who are misrecognized face the real possibility that they may be threatened, intimidated, and experience violence or even death. These microaggressions are pervasive and derive from intentional prejudice, unchecked bias, and a lack of awareness or information and or misinformation. To help make this more sense, I want to share with you a personal story. I don't identify with a gender. I identify as trans agender. This means that the way I think about myself, gender is not present. In this case, the use of trans means a few things that exist simultaneously. It means departed from, moved away from, while also recognizing that there is a continuum of identities. Though I disidentify as female, male, transgender, when others see gender and non-binary, see me, they position me as male and use male pronouns. Binary, this is quite common. But in order for me to disidentify from female, which is my birth sex, I had to go through a long process. In fact, it is ongoing. I am often asked why I want to change my legal documents to male if I do not identify as female. Well, this is such a great question, and one that even I have had to think deeply about. I have never felt female, though what does it even feel like to feel a gender? I have also never felt male for the same reason, but I want to be read not as female. Does that mean that I want to be read as male? Well, not necessarily. Yet there were many other people born in the 1970s, like myself, who felt constrained to choose either male or female because those were the only known options that would legitimize our identities. In the recent past, youth and 20 and 30 somethings seem to live in a world where there is more freedom to live in the in-between of genders or in gender fluid ways. But again, this was not the case in the 70s because gender identity was not discussed, let alone reflected on in any context. So left without understandings ourselves, we were coercively assigned a gender, though it might not make sense to some. I would rather, again, be read as not female, but that does not mean that I want to be read as male. But due to this chosen identity preference, I have changed my paperwork so that I can pass through legal gates that want me to choose a gender. Such coercion has required me to spend well over $125,000 for surgeries that I have opted to, and for changes to my federal, national, and state identifications. I recognize that having healthcare is a privilege and provides me access to services that otherwise might be denied. This is why discussions around gender identity justice are critical, because the fulfillment of rights are uneven and inequitable. Each of these changes has required massive time, effort, and a huge audit of legal paper. Here's just one example. In order for me to change my birth certificate, again, to disidentify as female, I had to go through a humiliating process. Now, I did not have to do this. That was a choice that felt important and not necessarily rational. It is not likely that I'll ever have to show anybody my birth certificate in the future, but I did this for peace of mind, just in case I ever do. The process of changing my assigned sex in my birth certificate was arduous. I am from Louisiana, where draconian laws still exist and are stringent. Each state does have its own regulations to have legal documents changed. But first, I had to travel to New Orleans and see a doctor who the state authorized to confirm any gender changes. In his office, I had to strip my clothing off to prove I had had top and bottom surgery. Then he had to write a letter and certify those changes with a letter. Then I had to gather notarized documents from my doctor, my therapist, and my surgeons that also attested to these changes. Next, I had to obtain medical releases and what is called operative reports of all of my surgeries. I then had to provide before and after copies of pictures from my surgeries, my driver's licenses, and my passports. And I had to have notarized evidence of my legal name change. Lastly, yes, there is a lastly, unless I have something else that I don't know I need to do. Hire an attorney and pay $2,000 for filing fees, court costs, and attorney fees. You see, my body is to some degree not entirely my own. My body is a living audit of this country's prejudice and ignorance. And although it is my body, think about what that means. Think about what it means to not own your body. Think about how such bodies are national and state subjects, vulnerable to shifting politics and policies, and how these bodies can be made disposable, how they can be erased. There is indeed a cost and literally a high price to living one's truth. As subjects of the state, bodies like mine are exposed to different manifestations of political and social humiliation and to being diagnosed as mentally ill by psychological and medical establishments. This exposure can be put to rest only when such individuals no longer have to prove their legitimate. What would this look like? This would mean ceasing to complete paperwork to change a name or gender on a birth certificate, social security card, or driver's license. It would mean not having to stand in front of a judge to prove an identity or being coercively diagnosed by a therapist with gender dysphoria, which is a mental illness, in order to have access to certain types of medical care and surgeries that prove to insurance companies that surgeries are necessary. It would mean not being treated or counted as a third, fourth, or fifth class citizen whose rights are always in flux and vulnerable to shifting whims of hostile politicians. It would mean such bodies would exist in society without having to prove or expose our existence. With a visual survey during any given minute, hour, half day, or 24 hours, or dozens, not more, microaggressions are targeting people with unfamiliar gender identities. Consider the broader reach of impact over the course of any day, whether it's in or out of school, and how it leaves individuals with thickening scar tissue. Consider how across a week, a month, a year, the aggregate of microaggressions can become debilitating and lead to dangerous psychosocial and academic consequences. This is altogether too much for anyone to tolerate. Yet even more intolerable is when that same person is a student and they have to wake up in the morning to go to school with these norms condoned and sometimes sanctioned. Consider how even my own story has left tendrils nearly everywhere I have gone and will forever continue to go. Okay. So I want to move on and talk about some of the current political issues that are facing our country. So as I said from the reading, what we know is that in the United States, trans and non-binary people and LGBTQIA people are under attack. This is unprecedented. There are more anti-trans and queer bills than under the presidency of Donald Trump. This has been a huge uptick against the left as the right wing has become angered. So this is what we see. There are currently an onslaught of over 252 anti-trans and LGBTQIA bills circulating around our country in 35 states. 35. Yes, that's correct. We have the Don't Say Gay bill that was signed into law in Florida by DeSantis. This is impacting teacher education, where through 12 teachers are not supposed to talk about LGBTQIA or K through it's at all. K through 3 is supposed to be completely censored, but from 4th on, post developmentally appropriate. However, developmentally appropriate, it seems to be, I don't know where it is, not talking about it at all is developmentally appropriate. Similar bills in Idaho, New Hampshire, and South Dakota recently that Alabama signed 2 bills that target trans young people and classroom discussion of LGBTQ identities. In Alabama, Senate Bill 184 now makes it a felony for medical professionals to provide a gender-affirming medical care for under 19, ages 19. And that means that they can be sentenced for up to 10 years in prison with a $15,000 fine. Arizona and Arkansas passed measures restricting transition-related health care, though Alabama is the first state to impose criminal penalties. Now, without reading any of this, I think it's too small for you to see. Let me just blow this up. These are the different categories in the United States that are currently under attack. So we have our youth, we have the relationship of the parent, we have healthcare, we have non-discrimination, we have criminal justice, we have religious exemptions, and we have the challenge to identity documents. So some of the things that we've seen on the flip side, though, are the changes. Okay, so although we are under attack, all at the beginning of this is we have to look good. What I also said, look at the right. We have to look at the changes. We have to look at the victories, because we can't stay lamented in the past. If we do, then we're not going to see the direction that we can go. So what we're seeing are changes in federal documents. We are now seeing, without having to show paperwork, that you can have your passport changed. So we see the letter X coming up. We also see changes in driver's license rights. We see changes in birth certificates. We see name changes on just regular documents. And we see this again on passports. These are without hardly any effort. And again, though, this is by particular states. Not a lot of states, but still this is some progress. Now, if we were to look here at protections by state, I want you to just take a quick look here. So gender identity is protected under policy in about 16 or 17 states. Again, I just want you to note that these maps change pretty often. And so I don't always have the most current information. But look at the red. Okay, these are negative gender identity policies. So while we have a lot of red, we also have a lot of progress. Now, one of the unfortunate downsides is we also have athletic bans on transgender, non-binary who want to participate in sports that authenticate their own gender identity. Now look at the green. The green shows friendly state guidance. Okay. The orange are guidance bans. The orange are guidance bans. The blue make students have to have surgery for participation. The pink, this places discriminatory restrictions on participation. And unfortunately, there is a lot of pink. And the last two, we have currently no state guidance or policies in motion. Now, if we were to look at LGBT equality by states, we do see that there is a high overall policy tally in 16 or 17 states. That's the dark green. We also have medium policy stats and fair stats. That's the darker green and the lighter green. So when we look at that, that is a lovely confluence of shifts and change. But when we look at low policy tallies, we see that in the orange and we see that in the red. And one of the things about the states that we often see in the red are these are states that have traditionally been known as very racist, conservative, and pro-evangelical, and have a very large religious right. Okay. Now, this chart is both alarming and exciting at the same time. Now, these are non-discrimination policies for youth by state. Now, I talked a little bit earlier today about enumeration, and enumeration is very important because when we don't name actual identities and policy, it creates loopholes where policy, negative policy, can be enacted. So if you look at the gray, and there is a lot of gray, these are states without laws prohibiting discrimination against students based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So again, when you don't have a law, that creates a space where laws can come in, okay? We want to see states with non-discrimination laws. So if you look at the orange, and actually the light green, which is, we only have one light green there, these are state laws. So we want to see more of that gray become orange. So we have a long way to go when we look at the United States, and just a few states with progressive policies protecting our youth.
Sorry to interrupt for a moment, Dr. SJ. Those
Sure.
Charts are not showing on your screen unless you're still in place.
Oh, no. None of those charts were showing?
No, they were not showing.
Oh, no.
No worries about that. If you could, you can. There we go. It's there now.
I wish you had interrupted me. Okay, I'm so sorry. I won't repeat all that, but I'll just point out the red and the green. Okay.
Right.
So in this, can you see this okay?
Yes, I
Kara?
can just see it fine.
Okay, I'm so sorry, everybody. So again, and here in this, we have the green. This is high gender identity protections. The red, as you see, we have more red necessarily than green. Okay. Here in the light green, these are state policies that protect trans and non-binary students in athletics. The pink, we have that are against that. How I want us to focus on the green. Hopefully, we will green and we'll see change more, and we'll see more and more changes over time. I'm going to pass this one. Okay. This is the other chart that I was concerned about. The gray states here, these are non-discrimination policies against youth. The gray do not have policies, which again create possibilities for loopholes where policymakers can actually create negative policies. The ones in orange protect youth. So we do have a few states that protect youth, but we still have a long way to go for our non-discrimination policies that protect youth in the United States. Okay. So what I want to do at this point, and I know that we're probably coming close to time and we want to have a Q&A, is I want to and Kara, can you now got visible?
Hello? You're
Kara?
visible. Yes. You froze for a bit. Okay. So also your screen is visible.
Okay. Okay, so do you see this red chart now?
Yes, I can see it.
Is this chart up? Okay,
Yes.
all right, okay. So I created what's called a gender identity complexity framework. And these are principles and commitments that advocate for people with complex gender identity. And this can be used in schools and businesses and nonprofits, all different types of organizations. And these are guiding principles. And I'm going to read to you the ones on the left. So essentially, principle number 1 says to refrain from possible assumptions that students ascribe to a gender or their gender identity. And again, this can be, this has efficacy in different work contexts beyond school. That we understand that gender is a construct which has and continues to be impacted by transsecting expressions of gender identity. It recognizes that masculinity and femininity constructs are assigned to gender, and gender identity norms are situationally performed. It understands that gender and gender identity as flexible and dexterous. It opens up spaces for people, for students to self-define with their claimed genders or lack of, with their pronouns or lack of, and with their names. It engages in an ongoing critique of how gender and gender identity norms are reinforced in literature, media, technology, art, and so on. It understands how neoliberal principles reinforce and sustain compulsory heterosexism, and how cissexism secures homophobia and cissexualism, and how gendering and cisgender assumption secures bullying and transphobia. It understands how gender and agender and gender identity transect with other identities, such as sexual orientation, culture, language, age, religion, social class, and so on. It advocates for equity across all expressions of gender and gender identity. And it believes that students who identify on a continuum of gender identity deserve to learn in environments free of bullying and harassment. So what can we do? What can we do as adults, as parents, as friends, as coworkers, and so on? We can ask ourselves, where do these fears come from? We can ask ourselves, how do I address my own fears? We can say, what keeps me from engaging more deeply in the work? We can think about who is vehemently outspoken in the work. What can you do to oppose others? How do you build your own confidence? How do I respond to others when they have questions about gender identity? And as you're seeing, there are lots of different questions and types of groups that we can engage in to do this work. What resources do I need to engage in this work? And how do I assess what other people might need to feel safe, affirmed, and recognized? So a few things, a few strategies that you might want to think about going forward. Often when we meet people, we don't necessarily recognize the impact that our body language might have. So some tips about positioning the body when we're interacting with people who may have a gender identity or experience that's different from ours. So it's important to physically lean into a discussion, because when you lean back, it might indicate a discomfort. So leaning in demonstrates a concern, a care, and a presence. Nodding your head and affirming comments, making direct eye contact, because diverting your eyes may show, again, a discomfort or a lack of interest. Keeping your body still and posed. Position your body horizontally while communicating. Again, turning this way or turning that way might present a discomfort. Smile and be sure that you reflect kindness. Okay. And then what can I do in my environment, my work environment? We can think about what to read, what to view, what to listen to, even how to feel, how to immerse ourselves, how to visit, and how to ask. We can look at documents to ensure that they're inclusive and sensitive about language. On many documents, you often see the word other, where you can put your gender identity. Well, putting the word other actually reinforces experiencing what it's like to be othered. So we don't want to put other. Okay. You can share your own identity with other people. You can say things like, I am cisgender. I am heterosexual, because when you say terms like that, it helps other people to recognize that you are an ally and that you understand what trans or non-binary means. You can put signs up. You can revisit policies to ensure that gender identity is protected within your organization. You can look back at bathroom protocols and update your signage. You can invite in speakers. You can revisit the naming practices and consider how to make it more expansive. Just like I talked about earlier, those naming practices are even like to be changed pronoun. In research shows that these are the singular most important factors for a trans person to primary person feel welcome. I'm just going to skip this slide. Okay. There are lots of different pronouns that people use. I put this up often where I work, but you'll see different common sets of pronouns. These are probably the most common that you'll see. Pronouns like them, their, and theirs, pers, and per self, z, here, here's, and herself, etc. I have a list of probably 100 and plus combinations of terms that people are using, and these are being generated by youth. Again, even though there are pronouns, there are people who don't use pronouns. So it's important to help to say, you know, I use these pronouns. How would you like me to refer to you? Which opens up that space if they don't use any. Okay. We're also seeing combinations of surnames before people's names. We're seeing surnames like MX. We're seeing Latinx or Chicanx. We see Latin ampersand. We're seeing Filipinx. We're seeing the use of other recognized how X is being added. The letter X tends to being an X to signify X added to be a signifier for non-gender specified and justified. Okay. Think of this at the very end, which is who is in my sphere of influence? So who can I bring about these ideas, these notions to? Who can I have these conversations with? Okay, so there's lots of people in your sphere of influence, right? There's yourself, there's your friends, there's parents, there's youth, there's business owners, there's neighbors, there's media, there's school board members, there's extended family, and there's local or state government. So there's a lot that you can do. And when we do this work, we help to increase capacities change. We have a more human, and ultimately we are creating an environment that we want those unborn children, like I talked about in the beginning of this talk, and those for their young children to come into a world where they don't have to fight for change. We want them to come into a world where they can impact change. So I just want to end with that so we have time for a Q&A. Okay. Okay, Kira or whoever is coming on.
All right. So if anyone has any questions, so I'd like to invite people to the floor. I believe we have our president who may have a question.
Hello. Thank you so much, SJ, for emancipating us through your session. I think education has to be emancipatory. It has to be something that enlightens us to move beyond. Now, when it comes to language, like many of us usually discount it, saying, why do we even need this? Right? So, what is the role, according to you, that language plays inside the classroom? In shaping the kind of individuals that come out in the society. So how much of it do you attribute it to language? Like whatever we see today, whether it's positive or negative, to language.
Well, when you say language, can you unpack that for me?
All right. So let me give you a context around it. Like when teachers use terms like, say, for example, guys, or uh, instead of like, saying children, people, folks. So when you have like a tilted language in the sense that, like, where you're not mindful of the broader spectrum that participates in your class. So one is that aspect of it. The second thing is the kind of the choice of words that we use day to day. Uh, that's the second thing that I'm okay. I think okay. Am I audible? Uh, SJ, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, so SJ, my question is two-pronged. One, when I say language, is the choice of words that we use within the classroom that either
I can't hear
symbolize.
anything, Kira.
Okay.
All right, no worries. So
Okay,
I
Kapil, would
think
it be possible for you to relay the message? I have two parts to the question where I spoke about language. So I'm learning German at the moment, and it is a little difficult to associate gender to everything that I see, right? Whether it's an object or it's a particular building. So one is that, like, how much of a role language plays in the way we think about things that we think in our societies. Number one, in our classrooms. The second part of it
Mhm.
was the choice of words that we use. Say, for example, like, the way we address kids, the way we engage in classrooms, the way we use certain words that might either hint at something positive or negative in relation to gender and identity. So, my question to you was, how much do you think of it contributes either to the negative connotations around the things that go around,
Yeah,
or to the positive one?
yeah, yeah. It's a great question. I mean, it's the lack of language, I think, right? The lack of language speaks volumes. So when teachers aren't aware of using inclusive language, they don't realize the motivational and engagement impact that they have on people. So absence makes a lot of difference. So, for instance, if I say boys and girls, or hey you guys, what I'm already doing is reinforcing a gender binary, and kids who don't use gender or outside of gender binaries don't feel part of the classroom, right? And so that's why we see this cascade of concerns about how it impacts, their mental and emotional well-being. And at the same time, the use of language and the use of inclusive language is life-saving, right? So the second a teacher stands up there and says, if you're comfortable sharing your chosen name or your chosen pronouns, out loud, feel free to. Again, that invitation is so important. And for kids who don't want to share that, to actually talk to those students about when you provide feedback on papers. That's always been something that I found to be very effective, because that way I can engage in dialogue, right, with them on their assignments in a different, more private, personal space. So at least they're feeling validated by, a more knowledgeable and caring other at school, which is critical. Right? Same thing, if it doesn't matter what you're teaching, math, science, social studies, English, history, again, using inclusive language is very important, and not talking about certain identities in the past that are related to the subject areas continues to reinforce an erasure. So, Aaron, I hope that answered your question.
I believe it did with Ariane. Actually, that actually brings
Ariane,
a
excuse me.
question for me. No worries.
Sorry.
Just from my own question, I'm a English teacher, but my students are ESL learners, so they're Japanese. And of course, when I'm teaching them these concepts of she, her, it, etc., they, them, how can I bring the inclusive education into that when I'm teaching learners who don't know English?
That's a great question. I would actually ask them, how they want to be called, and try to understand their identity, do what I call a funds of knowledge inventory, and have them look, more deeply into those, their own personal histories. and then learn with them, right? Do what's called translanguaging, putting up maps showing this is how I identify and this is what we might talk about in English. And we also know that language doesn't translate evenly. So if they might use a combination of pronouns or, use different syntax, to have them share what that means in their own language. And then, Kara, it's up to us to try to figure out how to be respectful to those, those translanguaging experiences and show the differences.
For sure, because at least in the Asian language or some countries, we don't have a conception of he, she, they. It's just one thing. So I just want to try to find a way to apply that when I teach English, because of course it's different. Yes.
Sure, we can talk offline more about that. That's a great
Of course.
question.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think it's about time. And I'll just be sending in some links that you provided me, Dr. SJ. So first of all, this is some free downloadable material. So if you go to the appendix here, you can find all of these resources. And also we have Dr. SJ's website and the TED-Med talk, and of course, all of these books here. So hopefully everyone can check that out.
Yeah. And I'm always you can reach me through email or my website. I really enjoy just having conversations with people. I really think it's important, especially for a world so divided around how important it is to have gender identity justice, that we learn more even from the opposition, because the kinds of questions that people bring forward who have some concern, that's where we all learn and grow, right? That we present our humanity, and when we come together, I think the word earlier was liberation, is that we actually liberate each other when we learn together.
I very much agree with that. So I believe this wraps our session here. So thank you so much, Dr. SJ, for sharing your stories and really informing us on the case here. So for everyone, again, you can join our community link and feel free to stay at the lounge to network and discuss and perhaps even meet Dr. SJ if available. All right. So
Sure, I'll stay on for a little bit. Yeah.
All right. So
thank you so much, Kara, for everything.
Thank you so much for having me, or being here rather. Okay. So we'll wrap this session here. Thank you again.